Alrighty, so in this one, we're actually going to have a look at using the quadratic formula. But let's just look at it for a moment. Minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared take 4ac over 2a. Alrighty, so let's look for problem points. Now, there's two problem points that I can see here. The first one's in the denominator. This could be an issue if this was ever equal to 0. What if 2a was equal to 0? Why would that be a problem? Well, it means we'd be dividing by 0, which would only happen if a is equal to 0. But if a is equal to 0, then what kind of quadratic are we looking at, right? If you have a quadratic in which a is equal to 0, well, 0 times x squared is just nothing, and so it's not actually a quadratic at all. So that's never actually going to be a problem. The other place there could be a problem is square roots. Why? Because square roots have a problem when they're equal to 0. And that's why we talk about the discriminant. Is square roots have a problem if we ever get a negative number. That's why we talk about the discriminant so much. And the discriminant is just that inside the quadratic bit, square root bit. Because the discriminant can tell us quite a bit. Let's have a think about plus or minus the square root of the discriminant. What could this mean? That's just this section of the quadratic. Now, if this thing is positive, if the discriminant is positive, well then you're going to get your two solutions, right? Because you're going to use the plus and the minus. You're going to be able to take the square root and then plus or minus. So this tells us we've got two solutions. What if it's equal exactly to 0? Well then, you're going to get the square root of 0, right? It's going to be plus or minus the square root of 0, which is plus or minus 0, which is plus 0, right? Therefore, you're not going to get the plus or minus actually happening. So you're only going to get one solution. You're still going to get one, but you only get one. If the discriminant is negative, on the other hand, well, that's a real issue because you cannot take the square root of a negative number. Therefore, you're going to get no solutions. And this can happen all throughout the solving process, that if you ever get negative square root, it means that you can't do any more work there, because in methods, we're not allowed to take the square root of a negative number. So, from here, let's actually have a look at doing some work with this formula. So let's take something and we could try the t-chart and we could do everything else. I'm just going to assume that we've tried all of that. We still want to find the roots. Let's use the quadratic formula. So the x-intercept, well, before I do that, let's check the discriminant. And the reason we check the discriminant first is that it's actually going to save up some of our calculations later. So we've got negative 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times 2, 16 minus 4 times 3 is 12, 12 times 2 is minus 24, which is negative 8, which is less than 0, therefore no roots / solutions. Done. This, when you graph it, will not touch the x-intercept anywhere. It'll look like one of those graphs, something where it does not touch the x-intercept, the x-axis at all. Okay? So that's easy. Let's have a look at another. Alrighty. So before we use the full formula, let's just check the discriminant. B squared take 4ac. Now b squared in this case is minus 20 squared minus 4 times 25. Minus 20 squared is 400. 4 times 25 is 100. 100 times 4 is 400. 400 minus 400 is 0. Therefore, we're only going to get one solution. But we need to work out what that one solution is. So now it's time to use the quadratic formula. X is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared take 4ac all over 2a. Except I already know that b squared take 4ac is equal to 0. So x is equal to minus 20 plus or minus the square root of 0. Well, plus or minus the square root of 0 is just gone, all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 4. Therefore, the one solution is going to be at 20 on 8. Both have common factors of 4. So that's 5 on 2, or 2.5. And that's the only solution. So the only solution for this particular one would be 2.50. That's the only root. And it's going to look something like this, where it comes down, kisses 2.5, and goes back up. So it just touches on the axis at 2.50. Alrighty, let's look at one more. Alrighty, last one. So, first of all, check the discriminant, see how many solutions we've got. Alrighty, b squared is 4 squared minus 4 times negative 6 times 3. That's going to be 16 minus, but we've got a negative there, so it's going to be minus, so it's actually going to be plus. 4 times 6 is 24, 24 times 3 is 72. And we get 88 as our discriminant, which is bigger than 0, therefore 2 solutions. So this should be the standard use of the formula. X equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared take 4ac all over 2a, which is minus 4 plus or minus the square root of 88 all over 2 times negative 6 minus 4 plus or minus the square root of 88 all over negative 12. Now we could work out our 2 solutions from here, but there's a little bit more simplification that needs to happen, and the issue is with the square root of 88. That is a surd that can be simplified. So let's think about how we would simplify the square root of 88. Well, we could write that as the square root of 8 times 11, which is probably better written as 4 times 2 times 11. Now, since 4 is a square number, we can bring out its common factor. We can bring it out the front by taking the square root of it to get 2, and we're still left with 2 times 11, or 22, left inside the square root. That's useful, and we'll see why in a moment on the left-hand side when we bring it back over. So we've got minus 4 plus or minus 2, the square root of 22, all over negative 12. Now 4, 2, and 12 all have a common factor of 2, so we can cancel that out. Left with minus 2 on the top, plus or minus the square root of 22, all over negative 6. Alrighty, so now we can work out our 2 solutions. So x1 is going to be negative 2 plus the square root of 22, all over negative 6. And x2 is going to be the same, but with a minus. So minus 2 minus the square root of 22, all over minus 6. Now, the one on the right is a little bit more interesting because they've all got a negative. We can actually cancel that from top and bottom, so we actually get 2 plus the square root of 22 on 6. And that's our first root, our second root. And our first root, there's not much simplification we can do, so we are just going to have to leave it like that. And those are the 2 solutions to this question. Alrighty, I'll see you in the next one, now that we have mastered the quadratic formula. See you.